So here we are going to talk about the identity problem, and let me make this a little bit more so that it stands out more. Okay. Yeah. So in common language these days, I mean, especially in the political arena or even in the social media field, you'll find a lot of talk about, people trying to find out what it means to be themselves and how they want to present or express that in the real world. And it's an interesting phenomenon because there are many different ways to look at it. One of it is to look at it from a society perspective at large, and the other way is to look at it from, let's say, not a religious, but from a contemplative standpoint. For people who are interested in, let us say, the contemplative perspective on identity, so I'm going to maybe write this topic here: contemplative perspective on identity. This might be like a view that's common mostly in the East. It might also be quite prevalent there in contemplative traditions in the West, but I'm not so much aware of them. So I'll talk a little bit about, from a Hinduism perspective, or maybe even Hinduism is kind of a very vague term, really. But if I'm looking from a traditional Indian philosophical approach to the problem of identity, maybe I can talk a little bit about that. So from this particular perspective, when I say we, it's because I am, from that tradition, because I was born in it, and we tend to view identity as a process. I mean, it's not like we have an answer to who we really are. So I can tell you what the process looks like. It's always trying to see what we are not, because it's always clearer to see, what we are not. For example, in the real world, if we are just, being in a real world and we are walking around in the real world, we know that we are not the table, we are not the chair, we are not the tree. So these objects are clearly not us from that particular perspective. Okay? And then what you do is you start talking about deeper elements of being, such as, awareness of your body. So you would, or even your thoughts, and you would actually try to think, okay, well, look at my fingernail. Is this part of me? Does the fingernail define who I am? And then you think about it and you say, well, no, if my nail gets long, I just cut it off. I am still here and in the here in the, and the now, so I am clearly not my nail. The same thing for the clothes I wear, for the hair on my head. If I pull one hair strand out, it doesn't seem to affect my identity so much. But maybe if I remove my whole hair, the whole lot of, and have a bald head, maybe that would start changing my identity to some extent. So it's kind of a way of sitting traditionally in meditation, and I'm not going to label the process. There are lots of names, and I don't want to maybe distract you with the names, and just focus on the core elements of the process. And basically you try to it's like an onion. You try to peel off anything that you might actually be conditioned to identify yourself with. And this would extend to things like, the job that you may hold, or your position in society, or your relationships, if you're the father of someone, or if you are the child of somebody. So you start viewing these as they in normal life, these feel very strongly to be what defines us. But this process tries to unpack and take all these feelings out so that you can see them. And one of I would say, the strangest things that happen when you go through this process is that you start seeing like your thoughts and objects at the same level. And after a while, you might actually start getting deconditioned, and you might actually start identifying yourself with things that change much less than what we are used to, and that starts forming the grounding for your basic identity, and that's why there are some people who, especially coming from the religious contemplative traditions, who are able to identify themselves with something that they have been able to observe directly within themselves that does not change. And so that becomes the source of their identity, and they can. One of the side effects of this is that they start improving their conscious awareness of thoughts and emotions as they arise, and see the interplay of all these different things. Okay, so that's one example of of the problem of identity from the let us say from the religious, even the let's call it Asian religious traditions, because you have similar pathways in Zen Buddhism and Hinduism, but to me, I mean, after having studied all this for a very long time, they're all very similar and very they share a lot of common ground. So that's one thing. If you look at the problem of identity from the way it's treated in the West, so you have a Western perspective on identity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So it's actually it seems to be originating more from a dualistic perspective. Origin is more like dualism. I'm introducing this term here kind of reluctantly. It's because if I talk about dualism, I need to talk about non-dualism, right? And that gets very, very, we can get really very deep. And usually I try to make my videos very, very short, because in this age of very scarce attention spaces, you have to do that. There's no choice. So, in short, a non-dualist perspective is kind of, in my view, it arises out of the process of that I just described. When you start trying to find your core identity, you can also start seeing that the things that separate humans or any beings from outside, all that separation tends to collapse. And that separation, even if it is between completely diametric concepts such as good and evil, or black or white, or thing, you will find that it kind of starts dissolving, and whereas from a Western perspective, those separations need to be solidified and needs to be clarified, okay, so that you know which box you belong in, and that's where we have, a lot of stress on self affirmation from that particular perspective. So let's take, for example, if we are to look from a Western perspective on identity, and we want to look at how one would define someone. So if I were to speak, let us say I'm going to speak speaking in English, so you already have some idea of some preconception about my maybe education or things like that. Mais si je parle en français, maybe peut-être que vous allez avoir d'autres idées à propos de moi, si je puis m'exprimer de cette façon. Alors, comme vous voyez, j'ai changé de langage. I just changed language, and that kind of changes my identity a little bit. But if I change more, if I start changing in another language, si moi commence cause créole, parce que ça c'est mon langage qui tout le monde causé dans Maurice, c'est un pays qui complètement fini. Alors, il est bien clair qu'il il est assez difficile pour moi pour cause dans tous ces différents langages en parallèle. So you can see that having all these different languages, I am weaving in and out, and even if I kind of found it very interesting that when you are multilingual and you're not good in any of the languages because of maybe it's a cognitive limitation, then when you find yourself in different societies where you end up in, that actually can be a disadvantage. And you can have an unconscious bias or racism that evolves around you because people don't know you. They see how you speak. They look at your accents. It's not some problem that's only in the West or it's not that at all. I actually spent a lot of time in India too, and the problem over there was kind of different. I looked Indian because of course I have Indian origins, and but when I went to the university over there to study, people would expect me to speak in Hindi, and if I didn't speak in Hindi, they would think that I was trying to show off. Okay. तो मैं थोड़ा हिंदी बोल सकता हूँ, but ये काफी मुश्किल है मेरे लिए. So again, I can speak a little bit of Hindi, but it's kind of really bad. So if I am, but you can imagine, okay, you're in this environment where everybody say, hey, all the friends speaking in one language, and then you come in and you look the same, and there's all kinds of problems. I think this issue we have to really, as people who now have so much information available, stop labeling people as being racists or not racist. I don't think it's helpful because a lot of that dimension is due to our cognitive limitations. Okay, so I think I would write this down here because it's an important topic that I didn't think I would talk about. So I'm going to write it down here. I would say maybe about racism and identity. Okay. So each of these topics, I mean, one could spend hours and day and talking about them. But it's kind of interesting if I can, spend some time on this, because you have, for example, what I could call unconscious racism, and you also have what you would call conscious racism. But I think, by and large, I very rarely come across conscious racism. I mean, these days, currently, even if it's in the news and you see someone reacting extremely badly, you can have people actually performing overtly racist acts, but then coming forward and saying, "Hey, I have friends in that particular community, and I'm not a racist or anything." So it's not that these people. I mean, it's like the manifestation of the racist phenomena is a result of cognitive deficiency. Well, I should not say deficiency, but it's because it's like all humans have this problem. I mean, we have limited cognitive bandwidth. The only thing we can hope to do is to be as aware as possible of what's going on in our heads. And we are not designed to do that, okay? We are not designed to do this. I think because of evolution, we are wired to snap, and we are wired to that's why we have the process of conditioning, because we want to shorten the path from decision making in the head and expressing it in the real world, because that's a survival tool. I mean, if we had to become aware of all these various mechanics of the brain and what's being output, well, we would probably never be able to react to anything. We might not even be able to play music. I mean, just try counting the beats when you're playing music in a band. No, you have to go with the flow. You have to, somehow be able to shut down your analytical mind and go with the feel. Okay, so and then there's also a very more I would say problem with racism is there are a lot of people who are also very good at signaling virtue, but they are not very they are not aware of it, in the sense that if you look at the behavior of a lot of people in politics and they are very maybe influencers in the social media, they would be talking in a certain way, and then you will suddenly be surprised that they would be doing something that doesn't seem to fit into their worldview. Okay, so it's not. That's still a case where you have someone who is known to be not a racist, who actually fights for victims of racism, but at the end of the day, you can see them, maybe act in a certain way very subtly. That would suggest that they might not be aware of racism when it's arising in the mind. As I said, it's probably very difficult to do so, and it's probably impossible, because I believe that we have very limited cognitive bandwidth. We are not designed to be as fully aware as we would want to be. Okay, so what are we going to do with this problem? Okay, so I guess we probably need to try to cultivate practices that would increase awareness. By that I mean, you would practice contemplative meditation, or I think it begins with very simple things like mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques. It's MBSR. Even if it's in a clinical setting or whatever setting you want to do it in, that's where one could start, at least to learn with the various techniques and see whether there's some change that can happen here. Bringing the topic back to the problem of identity in virtual worlds. Okay, so let's see here. The problem of identity in virtual worlds. Identity in virtual worlds. Okay, you can see that there's a lot of parallels between how we identify ourselves in virtual worlds and how we identify with ourselves in the real world. Even in a very simple virtual world like this one, if I were to wear an avatar, if I were to be in control of an avatar that is maybe that doesn't look good, or that looks made by someone who is inexperienced in designing, or if the technology sucks and you don't look good, and polygons flashing on my face and things like that, that would actually diminish what I would my identification in the virtual world. Okay, firstly, I won't be connected to my identity in the virtual world because I kind of secretly hate it. Or on the other side, when people meet me in the virtual world, they would be kind of distancing me, or judging me, or I might find myself being judged, or it gets complex. So why do we identify with any objects in the 3D world? I think, again, just like in the real world, just like I'm not identifying with this chair here, or this little picture of a car, or of any object, or the tree, or the mountain. It's like in the real world, I don't identify with these things, these objects, because I don't have control of them. They seem to be existing very much independently of me. But anything that I can have some control on, it's like on the clothes I wear, or on my avatar, and it seems that if you believe in free will, of course, and that you have chosen those artifacts to put on you so that you can express yourself, then this becomes part of your identity, so it's very similar. Okay, so you come with this identity in the virtual world. Then you can explore this topic further, and you can see how people who have issues with their identities in the real world, they can go into a virtual world and try, other kinds of identities, maybe to see or run simulations of how they would interact with people, or feel like in these other, I would say by wearing these other identities. Okay, so that's the one about identity in virtual worlds. Okay, well, if you have, I'm sorry to just have to finish this little piece of discussion here very quickly. It's just that I wanted to give you an idea how we can use virtual worlds maybe in different types of applications, and most of my talks are improvisational, and I really believe in the power of improvisation and playing with artifacts, real or virtual, and try to see whether we discover new things. And if you find that this clip has been useful or interesting, or even annoying, or anything negative, please comment in the section below. I also want to point out that all our efforts in the domain of distance learning, e-learning, virtual worlds, all these efforts are self-funded. And we are really trying to make our anything we make as accessible as possible to as many people who want it as possible. And this involves a lot of work. And we would be very happy if you are interested in this kind of thing, and you contact us, and we'll work something out. All right, so thanks for your attention, and I hope to see you again very soon. Okay, let me try to smile here. So it's Shift F1. All right, guys, see you next time. Bye.